I started my photographic career in a very small newspaper in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My real, I always had a passion for photography, but I also had a passion for travel. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to go to new places. I wanted to see the whole world. I went to India because I thought there was no better place, and a place that had so much depth, cultural depth, a mix of religions and the old and the new and the rich and the poor. I just thought this would be a wonderful place to start this journey and this sort of voyage of discovery. I think there's no place in the world that has the cultural depth of India. You have this incredible mix of religions, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, this Parsis, the Sikhs. It's an incredible variety of different faiths. And you also have an incredible variety of landscape and geography, the deserts and the jungles and the rainforests. And there's also an ancient quality to the place. It's very old civilization. You have people living in villages probably the same way they did 1,000 years ago. But you also have a very kind of ultra-modern society living almost side by side. You have a disparity of rich and poor. It's a place that you could spend several lifetimes and not really see all of it and experience all of India. I think the main influences on my photography have been people like Vermeer, the artist Vermeer, Henri Cartier-Bresson, the great Magnum photographer, André Kertész, a Hungarian photographer. There's a whole range of American and European and Japanese and even Indian. I think the great filmmaker Satyajit Ray was influence as well. So I think looking at art, looking at painting, looking at other pictures have been a real impact and a real, I would say, influence on my work. When I think of people who have left an impression on me professionally or photographically, people like Henri Cartier-Bresson, Dorothea Lange, Robert Capa, André Kertész, Eve Arnold. There's a long list of Walker Evans, Eugene Smith. There's a range of photographers whose work I've studied and looked at. I think of August Sanders, a great German portrait photographer. You know, there's an old news photographer named Weegee who was great at capturing moments of news events. I think you have to find inspiration and learn from kind of an array of filmmakers and artists. I think of, we talked about Vermeer and Rembrandt and Goya. Again, there's a long list of Picasso. There's a long list of artists who you can draw inspiration from and learn how they worked with light, composition, form and shapes and all this. You can learn as much from about making pictures from Picasso or an impressionist painter. So I think you draw on all these sources and learn. This is part of your learning process, which I'm always amazed at young photographers who don't know the work of these great masters, whether they be artists or painters or sculptors even, or photographers, or you know. So I think that's essential to one's education. The beauty of the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson was that he was able to blend great stories, great composition and form, and capture the right moment, the peak moment, the decisive moment, as he referred to it. So, I mean, picture making, photography is a blend of use of light, composition. But for me, the most important element of a picture, the thing that I really look for first, is a human story, is a picture that shows what life is like on this planet that we live on. That's really my first objective. Not the color, not the light, but really the subject matter. I see myself essentially as a storyteller. I see myself, in a way, an essay, a photographic essay is a story about a place, a region, a people, a tribe, or whatever. I love to show a complete look at a region, or a subject. Take, for instance, the nomads of India. To me, how they live, what they look like, where they travel to, their customs, their culture. To me, the whole story is interesting to me, not just one picture. But it's also great to be able to tell a complete story in one image. That's sort of the ultimate goal, I think. There's a very famous essay by the American photographer Eugene Smith, where he went to a village in Japan, which had been, this company had been poisoning the water with mercury and toxic chemicals. It had a huge impact on, I would say, thinking in Japan, and how one photographer, one body of work could really affect change and move people to action. I think the point about we have so many images now in the world, television, the internet, and all sorts of, that it's really now, there's so many voices and so much noise that it's hard to break through all that. And occasionally somebody will have such a clarity of vision that we do stand up and take notice, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult because of the kind of the din, the noise of all of the forces with the internet and blogs and websites and reality TV. Well, I think the main influences on my photography, I would go back to some of the Magnum tradition. Henri Cartier-Bresson, of course, being the foremost, I would say, image maker who was able to kind of blend a wonderful storytelling with great image making, design and content and light and everything. There was also other photographers. André Kertész, a great Hungarian photographer. I think Dorothea Lange, an American photographer who had a great compassion for people and was able to capture the plight of people who were having to leave their homes and go to another area because there was no work and whatnot. I think Don McCullen is a great photographer, showed the futility of war and how what a folly it is to basically kill one another in this kind of really futile actions. One thing I've noticed traveling around the world for 35 years is really that as a race, humans, we have far more in common than differences. If on the surface, we have different religions and different languages and different customs, but down deep, we all want the same things. We want to be loved, we want to be respected, we want the best for our family and our friends. And so we all respond to humor, and nonverbal communication is universal. So I think, there's far more things we have in common than differences, but somehow we obsess and somehow we get too preoccupied with our differences, religion and color of the skin and these kind of things. And it's just, I think eventually in another 100 years, 1,000 years, we'll sort ourselves out, but right now we're in kind of a dark age in that respect. I think a great photograph, a great picture, is one that you can't forget, one that in some ways stays with you and perhaps you learn from it. It's something that you go back to. It's a picture that becomes iconic in your mind, and a picture which represents a place or a feeling or some event. That's what a great picture is, one that you can't get out of your mind. Well, going into Afghanistan for the first time was a bit of a frightening experience. I was invited to go in by the Afghan people to document what was happening, which was their villages were being destroyed and bombed, and it was refugees were fleeing literally by the millions. But to go into another country without a passport, without any security, there were no police, there were no telephones, there was no way to communicate, there were no roads, no hotels, no restaurants. I mean, and the place was under basically civil war. It was very kind of, I would say, frightening for somebody who had never experienced that before. So, but once I crossed over into Afghanistan, I quickly kind of acclimatized and became very, I got very interested in the story, and it became something which I, in fact, followed and have followed for 30 years. I was doing a story in 1984 and 85 on Afghan refugees on the Pakistan-Afghan border. It was a powerful experience, and I photographed one young refugee girl who, as soon as I saw her, I knew she had an incredible look, an incredible, beautiful, haunted expression. And I knew it was a powerful image, but I never dreamed that it would end up being a picture which was, would become an icon, and a picture which would be recognized around the world. I mean, there's no way of really anticipating that. But I did know that this was an incredible portrait. This Afghan girl I photographed in 1984, was an orphan. Her parents had been killed in an aerial bombardment by the Afghan Russian army. And immediately after that, she became a refugee. So at a very young age, she's an orphan and then a refugee. She's had to flee her village. And then she, going from a kind of a beautiful home to living in a tent. So this had a dramatic, I would say, negative effect on her, as it would anybody. And to have to grow up under those circumstances must have been extremely difficult. I think that story indeed was written in her face. I think some of the hardship of her life was, actually you could see it in that expression. It's fascinating to speculate what it is about that image which has really struck a chord in people all over the world. I think that there's a combination in that photograph of, there's a beauty. I mean, she's an extremely attractive little girl. But there's a real genuine, authentic quality to the picture. There's the expression is a bit ambiguous, but but she's not posed. She's looking very honestly at the camera. There's a bit of curiosity. She's looking into a camera, which she had never done in her life. This was the first time she was ever photographed and the first time she met a foreigner. So there must have been a tremendous amount of curiosity and bewilderment of, you know, what is basically going on here. But you have that also with this whole, her life and her background and the fact that she was a refugee and an orphan and living in a very awful situation. I had been looking for her, in fact, for probably 10 years. I was always inquiring friends, you know, what happened to her, we need to find her. But after September the 11th, we made a very serious, there was a lot of interest in, you know, who was she? You know, we were wondering if she was still alive. People had told us that she had been, you know, killed. So we got very curious and we wanted to go and make a very serious search to try and find her. So we went back to the same refugee camp and we got very lucky. It was like a miracle that we were able to actually find her. And when we actually met her, again, after 17 years, we were so thrilled and so happy and grateful that she was still alive and that we were now in a position to actually do something good for her, to make her life better, to you know, to give back to her. So this was a great opportunity for us to find her, meet her, and actually attempt to set about, you know, educating her children and helping her in every possible way. When I'm making a portrait, when I'm photographing somebody, you're looking for an insight. You're looking for them to reveal something of their personality. You want to show this person an honest, true, natural, something very natural, something very, you know. I think it's a question of looking for a particular moment. There may be a lot of moments. You may have to take a lot of pictures to arrive at one. You never quite know. I mean, Henri Cartier-Bresson talked about the decisive moment. That there may be several decisive moments. There may be more than one, but you never know exactly when you're going to find that peak action, when the right moment is. So you have to keep working, keep several attempts. You don't know that the right picture's happened already or is about to happen. So you also, I think, need to work. I think actually the most important part of making a good portrait is having a connection, some kind of an emotional connection, being inspired by that person's face, their personality. You have to feel something inside yourself that kind of motivates you to try and find that. It's not an easy thing always to do that, though. Afghanistan is a very particular case, and the question and is why have we, meaning foreigners, always thought we could go in there and change the Afghans to our way of living, our way of thinking, and it's always turned out bad, and it will turn out bad as it's happening today. This will not end well. The Afghans in the end will sort themselves out. It's a whole, you know, Churchill talked about the Soviet Union being a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma. And in a way, you can almost think of Afghanistan as it's a problem which can't be solved by money and by killing people and by sending in troops from NATO and America. You know, it's just not going to happen. I think it's complete folly. And in the end, the Afghans will have to sort themselves out, and we'll look back on this venture as a waste and a tragedy. Civilization and humanity and our time on this planet, I mean, I think we're evolving slowly. I think we've made progress. Even in the last 50 years, I think of the civil rights movement. I think of the untouchable, the Dalits in India, and how they're slowly getting their rights. I think of women and how they're slowly, they weren't even able to vote in the United States, 100 years ago, and now they become part. We are Secretary of State as a female. I think of, the gay community and how they're becoming integrated and becoming accepted, whereas in the past it wasn't the case. So I think we're making progress, but it's very slow. Maybe we can't see it day to day, but another 100 years, another 500 years, I think we'll be at a better place than we are today. When I'm photographing on the street, I mean, in the genre of street photography, you want to be invisible, you want to be unnoticed, you want to be unobtrusive. That's so that life can happen and you're not influencing it. If there's a couple on a park bench, you want to photograph that relationship without disturbing it. If there's somebody playing with a dog on the street, you want to photograph it without disturbing it. So I think human behavior or animal behavior is fascinating, and it's best left in its natural state without interjecting yourself. I think there's no such thing as being totally objective. You always bring your own biases and your own passions. But I think that it's important to be, as a kind of a reporter, as a photojournalist, as a documentary photographer, you're obliged, you're bound to tell honest stories and to present the facts. I think if people feel that you're not fair and then it spoils your integrity, it spoils your credibility. As a kind of a reporter, you have to have credibility. You may feel a certain way, but you really have to report the event or the situation in a very honest way. I don't really look at places that I want to forget. Let me start over again so that you can... when I think of places in the world that I want to go back to, or places that I prefer, that I don't have any interest, I really, life is too short to go to places that you're not absolutely sort of interested and passionate to go to. So there's a lot of places I've been to that were interesting and perhaps, but I don't really feel like I need to return to those places. There are other places, on the other hand, that I long to go back to, and I always look forward to going back to, such as, Burma or Tibet or India. Most of the places in the world that I kind of have really spent a lot of time and have really touched me have been in Asia. Regarding color photography, I've never thought of myself as a color photographer. I've never been that interested in color in my pictures. I've always tried to avoid the wrong color palette. Color can spoil a picture if it's in the wrong balance and the wrong, the wrong juxtaposition. So I've always tried to avoid bad color, but I've never. There are obviously times when you're struck by a color scene, something in the, but it's not my first objective. The first thing I'm looking for is really the story, some human element, some action that really, again, says something about the world we live in, humanity, and that's really what I'm after, and that's my first motivation. And color is, I mean, the world is in color. We see the world in color. So naturally, it's more natural to shoot in color than it would be, say, in black and white, in my view. I love black and white photographs, but color is more natural because the world is in color. So, to me, the first mission, the first objective is really a story about a place, a person. I'd like to leave as a legacy my body of work, and hopefully people would look at it and see the commonality we have, and how, although at times we're different, we look different on the surface, I think we can appreciate and kind of, we can appreciate those differences and delight in those differences and enjoy those differences, but yet have a kind of a human bond that underneath our different languages and religions and skin color, we're basically the same. So I think my view of the world is an honest one, but I think it's also an optimistic one in some ways. In some way, tried to show some of the positive aspects and some of the beauty in the world, not shying away from the kind of the dark side of humanity, but saying that's something we have to work towards improving.